Va a empezar ahora la siguiente charla de esta EVA 2024. Queremos agradecerles a todos por acá. Voy a hacer un pequeño switch a English. We are going to switch to English so you can understand what I'm talking about, and it's not all weird and Spanish. I understand your first time in Argentina, and you don't speak Spanish. Sí.
Hablo un poquito
español.
Comprendo un poquito.
Okay. He's do I'm pronouncing correct? It's Kern Oliver? No.
Yes.
Kern Oliver. Okay, cool. But Oliver sounds like really, I don't know, Spanish or something? No.
Yeah, well, I'm originally German.
Oh, yeah. You told me you were from Germany. Yeah, nice food you have there. But anyways, Kern Oliver, he's from OV Entertainment Group. He's going to be talking about Argentina and South America, the perfect partner in North America game evolution. He started working with South American companies a few years ago already. So he's working with some teams here from Argentina too. So let's give a round of applause to Oliver Kern. And
thank you very much, Hernan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hernan. Yeah, sorry, my Spanish is really so basic, so I will have to speak in English with you. I hope you understand most of it. I'll try my very best. So, first of all, a little bit about me. I've been in games for about 25 years. I've held multiple roles in different games companies, mainly in Europe. I was CMO at a company called Jagex. They had like a big MMO. I think it was also quite popular, probably more in Brazil, but in South America definitely, called RuneScape. I was also chief commercial officer at a company called Lockwood Publishing. They had like a big virtual world called ADVA Life. Also quite popular in Brazil, so you already see there is some relationship with like South America. I spent a few years, a lot of time in Saudi Arabia, working for a subsidiary of Savvy Games Group, who bought Scopely. And my role there was to build up the game development ecosystem in Saudi. Very interesting culture, lots of super nice, super friendly people, eager to learn something about games and game development, because for them, up to 2019, there was no entertainment. They didn't even have like music in an elevator. It was forbidden, right? And then 2019, everything changed. Then suddenly they had cinemas, there was music, entertainment, and then suddenly also people started exploring like, oh, I'm playing all these games. How would it be to make games? So I was there for a while. Now I'm Chief Operating Officer at OV Entertainment Group. It's a holding company that basically has some operating companies here in South America. One of them is a bigger studio called Cocu in Brazil. And then another studio that we recently acquired, actually in Cordoba, in Argentina, called the OGs. We renamed them from Three Ordinary Guys to Original Gangsters because we felt like that suits them much better. And OGs is kind of what everybody in the world knows is original gangsters, right? So, yeah, I do some board advisory. I've advised startups. I've been quite active in Europe with mobile games companies, helped them in marketing, commercial side of things, etc. I've done some angel investments, I think over the last 4 years, maybe like 20 studios or something like that, mainly in Europe, where I tried to help them. Also with money, but also with connections, introductions, all these kind of things. Yeah, and what I do is I've also in the past always come in like some kind of C-level role, helping with changing structures, making a company future-proof, helping them grow, And this is also to a degree what I'm doing in OV Entertainment, is making sure that the companies that we acquire actually are ready and fit for future growth. Yeah, and unfortunately, as it says in the last line, I'm a business guy, so not really that exciting. You know, it's part of games, obviously, and I do feel sometimes the business guys can kill the great ideas that come from game designers and game developers. But yeah, it's part of the job, I would say. But I really appreciate working in this industry because I love the creativity. I love creative people. I love passion. When people really fight for an idea and go for it, that's something that I really, really enjoy and I would never want to miss. So, just quickly what I will talk about, because of the theme, like I do feel like South America actually has a massive opportunity right now because there are a lot of things changing in how games are made. And you're probably seeing that in the news, lots of layoffs everywhere, you know, especially like in North America and Europe, you know, lots of big studios letting lots of people go. And it's tough. It's really hard. I mean, you all know making games is the hardest thing in the world, but at the same time, it's also the most rewarding thing if you are able to put something in front of people and they really love what you do. But it also comes with opportunities, and that's what I'm also going to talk about. There are obviously also some key challenges, you know, working especially in partnership with some of those big studios, and I will touch on that. And then also look at something called consolidation, and I'll come to that, why this is on the agenda here, actually on my next slide. So, one of the big opportunities that exist is, you know, you see all those layoffs, big studios in the US letting people go. Now, what is clear is that these big companies still need to deliver product. They still need to launch something, right? But what has changed is that they look at how risky it is these days to actually launch a game, and one of the things that they really, really have to do is they have to make sure that they reduce their cost. You know, if you want to build a game, and I'll come to that later, for, I don't know, like $1 million, if you do that entirely in the US, you will only have a very short time frame to actually do that, and it will be a very, very small team. Whereas if you were to develop that in partnership with, for example, studios in South America, you would be able to have a much bigger time window and more people on the project, which means that actually the product that you're going to launch actually is much more advanced. And as we all know, what people expect these days from a game, even like in early access, is a lot more than it was like 10 years ago, right? So what is happening is that there is this so-called external development. Companies basically saying like, okay, I have like a core team here in, I don't know, West Coast, America, Los Angeles or something like that. But in order to actually deliver the product that I want to do, I need to outsource some of the services. And that's where actually there is a massive opportunity. Now, what has been a trend is that actually there are less and less smaller projects that are actually outsourced. So, you know, 25% of the spend on external development in 2020 were like projects below $500,000. Today, that is only about 10%, right? Just as an example. Whereas the very, very big productions, you know, they are getting bigger and bigger. And that's obviously quite a challenge. You know, if you're a small studio, what do you want to do? You cannot even get access to those deals. and yeah, your market basically, if you want to participate somewhere here, is kind of shrinking, right? So that's quite a challenge, and I'm going to come to that. This is basically what is happening. Overall, the external development here, it's just always 100%, but that is actually growing healthily year after year. So there is more and more money spent from very big studios, also like AA smaller studios, not only the very, very big ones, that are saying like, okay, part of our development, be it art, be it engineering, we're going to actually outsource to other teams somewhere in the world. So it's growing, but there are definitely some challenges around that. Another challenge that we have in external development is that when it comes to like art outsourcing, as well as engineering, you know, most studios have like some preferred partners, and they keep working with them. It's as with everything, the closer you work with somebody, the longer you work with somebody, it just gets better. So they know there is a risk of changing a partner, but there is certainly opportunity. Like the orange is something. So these are like big studios, and they would say like, okay, well, in like 25% of the cases, we actually do also consider working maybe with somebody else. So once in a while, they will try to work with somebody else. Unfortunately, not in every case, but it will. The other thing that is happening is that, if you look at time frame from 2020 to 2024, the short-term contracts, like smaller, it fits like the other slide, like smaller, shorter contracts, that percentage is actually going down. And then like the big multi-year contracts, that is something that is actually going up. So right now it's probably around 50-50. And this was definitely quite different in like 2020 or something. So there is definitely a shift towards longer term relationship. And companies that also come here, that are here at EVA, looking around, looking at all the different studios, they are looking for longer term relationships eventually, right? So when they speak with you in like the B2B area and say like, hey, what is your studio doing, etc., they're obviously looking at you now, but they also want to see like, okay, where they will come back. They will come back next year and see like, okay, so what are you doing these days, etc. So they're basically looking for partners that can be like a long-term partner for them, which means they will maybe do like initially, you send them some portfolio, you send them some of your work, etc., and they will look at that and say like, well, this is good or not. They will start with a small test, and then eventually it becomes like a bigger and bigger project. But their interest is definitely much more towards a long-term relationship. And the areas where people expect actually growth from like external partnerships is like in 3D art. So this is something that, not, because as you know, it's a lot of work, lots of assets, etc. So this is something that is actually growing when it comes to working with other studios. 2D concept art is also an area that is growing. Animation is an area that is also growing. Console development is an area that is growing, where a studio will say like, yes, we can do this in-house, but we can also give this to a partner that we trust and have them do the work. There is also some mobile development, obviously a little bit less, but it's also kind of a growing area. Whereas like some other things like localization, QA, some of those other things are kind of stable or declining. But this is like where people expect actually the growth for this year when it comes to that. So where do the opportunities then lie for LatAm? So as I already mentioned in the beginning, like there is like a massively increased cost to actually develop games. Not only here in South America, but also in the US, things have gotten much, much more expensive. But that also means that salaries have gone up. Inflation obviously has not only hit here. I know here it's extra bad, but it has also hit some of the much more established countries that are scared when it hits like 5%. I know that's like nothing for here, but still. Now imagine you were a publisher and you would park a budget for a game of like, let's say 1.6 million. You would say like, okay, well 50% of that I will use for development and 50% I need in order to kind of market this, right? So I have like a budget of 800,000. Now from that money, if you want to do this in the US, you can basically have like 10 senior people for 6 months. That's, as I mentioned in the beginning, a very short time frame, very few people. You have to really quickly get it right. If you go into like Brazil or even Argentina, suddenly you have like a much, much bigger team. And most importantly, you also have much, much more time. So, you know, you can really kind of fine tune your game. You can do some great iterations. You can really do a little bit more of exploration until you kind of get it right. So there is a big advantage. And the North American studios are starting to get really aware of that because they see that they just cannot create any big, meaningful games in the US alone. It's just too expensive. If you want to have like, I don't know, for a big AAA game, 150, 200 developers all on the West Coast, that's just insane. Yeah, it will be so expensive. And as we all know that, you know, even if all the money is spent, it doesn't mean that this game will become a success. So that's why a lot of studios, also some of them are here, are looking basically for opportunities to work with partners here. Now the other thing that is really important is the time zone, because what South America actually offers is is an availability for like North America as well, even for Europe, right? So yeah, somewhere here the overlap is a little bit too small, but you know, if you have like 4 hours, let's say, overlap per day, you can still do a lot. Obviously, US is more convenient, but even Europe, I think, is opportunity. And there are quite a few European studios, big studios, small studios, indie studios, etc., that are also looking to like how and where do I outsource? How and where do I find partners? But if you look at some of the more established ones, let's take here from Argentina, Ravagan. They work a lot with Supercell in Finland, which is here on the far side, right? And they're somewhere here. So, you know, they don't have that much overlap, but, you know, it's a well-established partnership for many years. Both parties are super happy. So that kind of works, right? It doesn't only have to be North America. Another thing that is obviously also interesting for any studio, be it in Europe or in North America, is like when it comes to, for example, Argentina, it's a big talent pool. There is no question about that. Good universities, people actually know something. There is artistic tradition, so a lot of the arts, etc., have been done. There is also already here quite some legacy. I remember like Jam City had like a big studio here doing a lot of mobile free-to-play games in terms of in terms of live ops, etc. There is proven high quality, as I said, like we have obviously Nimble Giant, you guys are all aware. There are more. I just put like a few names here. You know, we have, yeah, even companies like Sandbox that have like quite a lot of engineering here. There is obviously, and that's important, the cultural affinity as well with with the Western markets. That's something that is a big advantage over, let's say, Southeast Asia, as an example. It's a growing industry. You know, people always want to go into like a growing industry and partner up with an industry that is growing. So, you know, in Argentina, that's now more than 100 million US dollars. There are grants, tax incentives, all of that can play a role. Yeah, and then obviously there are the educational hubs that you're probably all aware of, and that plays a role because it's not only about the talent today, but also about the talent tomorrow. Similarly, in Brazil, things look also pretty good. It's obviously a bigger market, even more access to talent, a lot more studios, but a lot smaller. I think that the difference is that in Argentina, you may have less studios, but some of them are actually really, really sizable, whereas in Brazil, the majority of studios are like small, really small, like 5 people, 6 people. I know it's a really successful studio of 2. So, you know, yeah. In Brazil, like 50% of the studios actually provide outsourcing services, right? So that's, I don't know how that is in Argentina. I didn't find any data, and Mauricio, I didn't ask him, to be fair, but he might have been able to tell me. But in Brazil, it's like 50% of the studios actually also do provide work for other studios. And yeah, there is like growing art services, especially for like 3D and animation. As I showed earlier, these are definitely also areas where there is a lot more interest from other studios. There is also like a rich cultural depth. And then beyond that, you know, the key hubs are more in the south of Brazil. I would say that's definitely where some of the universities sit, as well as a lot of the studios have established themselves. And like key area that I found like in my research, sure, you're aware of that, like there is a lot of talent here around like C#, engineering, Unity. When it comes to 3D art, it's obviously like Blender and Substance, which are quite easy to access for any artist who wants to kind of explore that area. But there are also challenges that are, I think, are important to be aware of. Nothing bad. I think there are some gaps when it comes to seniority, which definitely sometimes makes it quite hard for various reasons. But usually when like a US or UK studio asks for like a senior engineer or expects like a senior engineer, in their mindset that is usually quite a much longer time frame that somebody has actually been developing games. Because obviously also those countries have much more history of making games, right? But for them generally, you know, like a senior software engineer or artist is more around like 8 to 10 year mark, right? What I've seen here is you can very often find people that have the title senior, but actually only have like 4 or 5 years of experience. And that's, you know, it just means that there is a difference what the client expects if you work together with another studio and what you actually are able to kind of deliver in terms of the experience that you have, right? It's just something to be aware of. I do also feel like, you know, for people that are working remote, it just takes a lot longer for them to kind of really seniorize. It's not for everybody the same, but you know, in general, what I've observed over the last few years, you know, if you just work remotely, it just takes longer to really participate in that learning curve. So that's kind of certainly one of the challenges. There is obviously also like the challenge around retaining talent, right? Because what remote work has allowed many people, probably also here in Argentina, to actually work for like the top studios, or at least send a CV and see if you get a job there. Would be so amazing, right? And for some that actually has happened, and then subsequently they thought like, well, let me try to actually not only work for a studio there, but even live there, right? And so, you know, a number of people have actually then left for North America or Europe just to have that experience, and it's great. I would never stop anybody. I'm an expat myself. I think I left Germany like 20 years ago or something like that, and lived in different countries, and I think it's the best thing to do, to actually have an experience of other cultures. Anyway, the other thing is like the size of studios. Obviously, you want to build out senior people. It means that they also have to have the opportunity to actually develop seniority, and it means in a small studio there is very little opportunity to kind of manage people. You know, if it's a 10-people studio, you will never have the experience of managing a team of 15, right? So it has some limitations also in terms of what you can learn, and the project sizes and all these kind of things. So that's a challenge. Now, you know, one of our studios, Cuckoo, they put a lot of effort into also developing people, but you know, the rewards are obviously also limited. I mean, I had that discussion with somebody there. He said like, well, we're training all these people, then they're great, and then they leave, right? So that's a little bit of a challenge. So you feel like you're putting all that effort into people, you're getting them on the way, and then for good reasons, they like, okay, great, now I know something, let me try that in another environment. So that definitely also has its challenges, I think, as studios. And then I think one of the things is also that I've observed is that people underestimate actually all the changes that are happening, you know, because they are. Especially when it comes to like use of artificial intelligence. I think as studios, it's better to rather embrace that, because it's good to see what is possible with that, because the fear that it would replace engineers or artists, I think that's not going to happen. You still need to be a good artist to see if whatever AI spits out is actually good or not. And the same as an engineer, if you get some recommendations for how to fix your code, you would still need to be able to assess if that actually makes sense or not, right? But the primary reason why people think or see the opportunity around AI is actually that it increases the efficiency. You can actually do more faster. And that bears two opportunities. You could either say, okay, well then we can do games cheaper, or, and this is like, has always been the games industry, we've never ever tried to make games cheaper. We rather said, let's try to do more and a better experience for the same amount of money. And I think that is definitely the trend. So, you know, this being afraid of losing jobs, oh, I don't want AI, etc. It's so, creates so vanilla. Yes, it's true, still is in its infancy, but I think it's rather okay to kind of embrace that, because there is an opportunity to really dramatically increase efficiency. Another thing, you know, I mentioned earlier, like where LatAm is really strong is like C# engineering, Unity, a lot of mobile projects, obviously. And then with 3D art, more like the free and easy accessible solutions like Blender and Substance. But where the demand is definitely from like the studios in Europe and North America is absolutely towards C++ and Unreal. And when it comes to 3D art, for example, it's much more around like Maya and like understanding Lumen and Nanite and the challenges around like tech art in Unreal than like those solutions that are easier to do. Let's put it that way. What the big studios are looking for is like super high quality, and therefore the trend is absolutely towards those very high end things, and that's where they're looking for people as well, right? So, you know, for everybody who's like, okay, what should I learn next? There you go. There are obviously other challenges, right? It's even bandwidth, internet speed, like, you know, I mean, in North America, like 180 to 200 megabits per second is not even the fastest, but it's significantly faster, obviously, than like the average South America. I don't know why Chile is a little bit different there, but maybe you guys know. But yeah, for Brazil, Argentina, obviously that is a challenge, and I think it's important that you know, game developer associations, etc., really also kind of push for policy and technological advancements, etc., because this is obviously important not only for game development but for all like tech and software development, right? And then obviously access to like tools, hardware, dev kits, etc., is really problematic, as you guys know. You know, I'm not sure exactly how much it is in Argentina, but in Brazil you can easily pay like double or 3 times than you would pay in the US, right? And that makes it really unfair. Another challenge that some people underestimate is the cultural differences. And it's really one of my favorite topics, because, you know, I'm trying to tell people also in like the Brazil studio when they work with the Argentinian studio, hey, you know what? These guys actually are different. So when you say something, it doesn't mean that they understand what you're actually talking about, right? You may think it's totally clear. It's not. And the same counts also when you're working, for example, with US company. Let's say you have a studio in the US that works with you. Their communication style is very different. So this is like low context, means it's explicitly always said what is supposed to do, what is supposed to be done. Very explicit. Their briefings are usually quite detailed, etc. Whereas like in Argentina, Brazil, you know, there is high context. There are a lot of things between the lines also when you communicate via email, etc. That's not the case in the US. It's much more straightforward also how they communicate. When it comes to like feedback, giving feedback, I think the US sits somewhere in the middle because they're usually quite polite with their negative feedback. Argentinians are actually even more direct than the US. But the Brazilians, yeah, you have to be super careful. You have to say it, you know, just somewhere between the lines. Maybe there is some room for improvement, etc. Right? So it's quite different. And then when it comes to like leadership and decision making and these kind of things, the US is used to very egalitarian, like everybody has a voice kind of thing. I do think in games we've learned our lessons that, you know, more people see more shit. So it's actually good that everybody has a voice, but in general, you know, in South America, it's at least in comparison to the US, a bit more hierarchical, that, you know, the boss says. Not as extreme. There are certainly also some countries where it's somewhere here, like Japan maybe. But still, in comparison to the US, definitely something like that. Decision making, very similar. The other thing which is super interesting is how you build trust. right? Very important. You have a client. You have a partner that you're working with. A US company will build their trust based on you delivering what you say you're doing. Being a reliable partner is for them the most important thing. For a Brazilian producer, they want to be best buddies with the producer on the other side. It's like, hey, how's it going? Right? It's about building like a relationship, being best friends, and also discussing things that you would discuss as friends, but never as business partners, right? So there are definitely lessons to be learned that, you know, you think like just because you're speaking with them all the time and you're having fun on calls or whatever, you know, you can trust each other. That doesn't mean that it's the same on the other side. And then, you know, another thing that I want to kind of point out, I think everybody is aware, delivering something on time, being reliable, is super, super important, right? And I do see that, you know, I'm German, right? I'm like somewhere here, right? But like for like South American people, you know, it's like, I have that sometimes, you know, I join a call, I'm there on the dot, and then like over the next 5 to 10 minutes, then people start jumping onto that call, right? But the same also means like for delivering product, you know, delivering a milestone, etc. You know, our clients in the US expect us to actually be on time and not come like a day before and say like, oh, it might be tight. So that's definitely something that, especially if you're like a producer on a game, is something you have to be very, very mindful of. And then another thing is like, how do you present your cases? Also very, very different. So in the US, it's very common, you start a presentation, and I didn't do that because I'm also somewhere probably more here. But you know, in the US, you start with an executive summary. You say like, okay, this is what we're going to do. And then you explain like why and how you came to that conclusion, etc. Whereas like in other cultures, it's more that you explain like, yeah, so these are kind of the findings, etc. And then you come to a conclusion. It's a very different mindset. So if you go into a presentation and you start talking about that, the US counterpart will say like, okay, when is he coming to the point? What does he want to tell me here? Right? Because in their mindset, they've learned that you start with that. Right? So very different. So also when you do a pitch to like a US studio, try to think of it's the other way around. Right? They want to first see the conclusions and like what your summary, so to say, is, that usually in your deck would sit on the last slide. Now, so how do you benefit? I mean, I shared like a few of the challenges that we're seeing, but okay, there are some real challenges, right? There is a decline of the small, short projects where you could benefit from as a studio. You're here in Buenos Aires or Cordoba or wherever. And, you know, the smaller projects are becoming less and less because there are less indies in the US. It's hard for them to get money to actually get a bigger project done where they can then also outsource. You also don't have all the relationships, so you know the long-term projects takes time to kind of get there. So how can you actually benefit then from this this growth? So there are a few things that you can do. So one is you can focus on a niche and don't say, oh, whenever a client says, oh, do you also do QA? Yeah, we do QA. And what about animation? Yeah, we do animation as well. And what about localization? Oh yeah, we're experts in localization. We also do community management, marketing, whatever you want, right? I don't think that that's something where you can really grow, because you have to actually focus rather on something where you're really, really good. Because what is key for a long-term partnership is that you are known for a specific thing where you're really, really good. So focus on that, focus on some niche markets. If you've had a few good experiences with building VR games, focus on that. Don't try to do just everything, right? If you've had some great successes with developing amazing pixel art, focus on that and become the experts there, right? If it's around like keyframe animation, focus on that. Don't try to do everything and mocap and whatnot, right? Then the other thing is, how are you able to participate in bigger projects, right? So one of the things is to collaborate with larger studios, right? They also don't always have like 50 people available tomorrow, right? So when a big studio comes and says like, hey, we want to run this with you, we need like 60, 70, 80 engineers over the next 3 months, they don't necessarily always also want to hire them all. So maybe there is a way to kind of collaborate with some of those studios and basically say, hey, let's do something together. And then there is obviously opportunity for like consolidation, and this is also something where you know, OV Entertainment is quite active. You know, we basically see like, so for OV it's not only games. There is certainly a focus on games because all the founders are, you know, have a games background, but we also are working on like film, TV, and advertising. We have some companies there, pure production. You know, as I mentioned earlier, we acquired the OGs, which is a bit more focused on tools and tech. Definitely also really, really strong with porting, very tricky games. And then like when it comes to game development, full development, etc., that's where Coco in Brazil plays a really strong role with some very, very big collaborations with some great studios. And as a company, OV then provides like the support when it comes to operations, like central services, be it like recruitment things, whatever. There are lots of things, finance, legal, all these kind of things that are usually a headache, and you know, the founders that we speak with are like, yeah, somebody has to do it, so I'm doing it. But it's great if I don't have to, because actually I'm passionate, I'm an artist, and I really want to grow my art team. That's what I actually want to do, and that's where we can then take some of that burden away, right? We obviously do have some LatAm market knowledge, not me, but some of the others in the group, and we do have access to kind of larger projects, right? That's what also was super interesting for the OGs, where they felt like, okay, this is an opportunity to actually get access to working with some of the very, very big developers, and not only like smaller indie teams that are doing porting. So that's why I think they are super, super happy. And you know, it's still founders first. Yes, it's owned by OV Entertainment, but the founders are there, and they are the ones that make the decisions. It's them that have made it successful until then. We're going to help them for the next growth period, but it's still them that need to make the decisions. So we're not just rebranding it and making it like an OV Entertainment company or whatever, like some of the other companies that are having similar strategies do. And I think that's it. So thank you very much. Yeah, I hope this was interesting. I mean, I don't know where we are on time, if there is still time for some questions. If you want to do Spanish questions? One question? Two? No, three questions. If you want to ask in Spanish, then Hernan has to translate. Okay, here.
Voy a tratar en inglés y si no me sale. Okay. So
En español.
I will try in English. It's not
Okay,
my
great.
best, but and then I will try to say it in Spanish. You said that you need, if you have the same budget, you need less seniors in the US, but here, I don't know, like 10 seniors for like 6 months, I think. But in Brazil, in Argentina, you need like 25 or 35 seniors for like 12 months production. Is that correct? So
Yes.
that depends because how much is the wage for example, the senior of the US and the senior for here, the Brazil? Okay. Yes.
I just knew that I had that slide, sorry.
Yes.
No, because it's obviously it is misleading, so that's why I didn't actually put it in the presentation. Yes, like somebody in the US will earn a lot more money, crazy amount of money, right? Compared. However, they will still pay about 35% of that for their flat, and they have to pay for health care and all of that, like crazy amounts of money.
It's not the same cost of living.
So, you know, it's not that it's such an amazing life and you're going to be a king. It's not going to be the case, right? But our games are made for global markets. So what matters is like, okay, this game has cost in development $800,000. And if I have $800,000, you can calculate, like, you cannot have many people for a long time. Whereas, and they're equally good or close to, maybe not as super experienced, but they're also great engineers, right? But you can just get so many more people for so much longer to work on that game for the same budget. And as I said, I'm a business guy, right? I say, guys, whatever you want to do, this is the budget, right? And then it's like, okay, do I want to work for longer with more people on this to have the best possible game, or very limited, and then I can only develop in the US? Does that make sense?
Yes, completely. Thank you.
Okay. There was somewhere there in the background.
Hi, thank you for your talk. I want to ask, in your experience, do you think that in the future AA games will be above of AAA games, or that's probably never happened?
Look, I mean, that's a hard question. So I think personally, I think it's the wrong attitude to start and say we want to build a AAA game, right? Because that already puts you on a certain path in terms of what the budget is, et cetera, et cetera. And I do think like a game like Wukong shows that, you know, even with a small team, even with a reasonable budget, you can create like a world-class title these days. So it's not necessarily, or it's not necessary that you have like 500 people working on a title. Yes, it will continue to be the case for like the very, very big franchises. You know, that's rather going to go bigger and bigger and bigger, so to say, like the next Call of Duty, whatever, you know. But like a new AAA from scratch, look, Sony is trying that once again in Santa Monica, but they've just failed. Like I think they spent like 400 million on that game. I even already forgot the title. Yes, thanks. You know, and it failed, right? So there is no guarantee that just because you spend a lot of money on development is going to make it success. So I do think, yeah, you still have to build like a great game. And for me, like the tools that we have today allow us to actually build, like, I mean, you saw like 2 days ago, like Fab being announced and everything for free until end of the year, etc. So I mean, the amount of things that you have to build a great game with a small team is like, has never been better, right? I hope that answers that.
Okay, good answer. Thanks.
Hi, thanks for your presentation. I'd like to ask you, since you've compared video games ecosystem from Argentina and Brazil, and since this is the slide you're showing now, what are the main differences between Brazil and Latin American ecosystems and US or North American ecosystems?
So the US ecosystem they've been making games for much longer, right? You will find people that have been making games for 40 years. So they have much longer history of making games, right? And therefore also experience of things that have worked, that have not worked, how to make great games, what matters, all these kind of things, right? So I think that is a difference. I think in terms of passion and all these kind of things, I think it's quite similar. Obviously, it's much more expensive to develop games in the US, so I do think like in the future, games will come from here. There's, for me, no question. Like if I look 10 years down the line, games need to come from here. Because the talent is there. Like if you take Brazil with 200 and something million people, that's almost as big as the US, right? Not exactly, but getting closer. Argentina is obviously a little bit smaller with like, what, 45 million or something like that, but 45 million is still huge. And it's a big pool of talent, right? So that's why I picked those countries, right? It's because I looked a bit deeper into them because of our acquisitions, but for sure they are also kind of good examples because of the size of the talent pool. So I think that's definitely the opportunity. Yeah, I think other than that, there is maybe also a bit more hunger. And you know, I was discussing that earlier with one of the founders of the OGs. You know, I do feel like people here are used to solving problems, not only at work, but also in everything, in their lives, in every day. It's about solving problems because there are lots of problems. You know, I'm blessed to come from a European, very safe environment, etc. Everything was there. Sure, there were also other problems, but nothing in comparison, right? So I'm not trained to solve problems as much. And I do think like when I look at game development, I do think it's also very, very often, or engineering specifically, it is problem solving, right? It's trying to see like, okay, how can we do this better, more efficiently, all these kind of things. So I don't think that people have that attitude maybe in a very established economy. So I hope that answers that a bit.
Yes, thank you.